Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
I guarantee you will regret taking part in this disorder, whether directly or those whipping up this action online and then running away themselves. This is not protest. It is organised, violent thuggery, and it has no place on our streets or online.
That was Sunday. So what next? This is Bloomberg UK Politics. I'm Stephen Carroll.
And I'm Caroline Hepker. You heard the Prime Minister there responding to a weekend which saw England's worst rioting in over a decade.
It came after claims online from far-right groups that wrongfully had said the perpetrator of last week's Southport knife attacks, which left 3 young girls dead, was a Muslim immigrant. Now, anti-immigrant riots across the country are threatening to plunge Starmer's Labour government into its first major test.
Keir Starmer saying that participants in that violence will face the full force of the law. The Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, also saying that mosques will be offered stepped-up support. It raises all sorts of questions. The motivation of the rioters, how the police have managed it, police resources, the ability to deal with this sort of widespread unrest, and simply the speed of the gatherings, partly fuelled by online.
Well, joining us now to discuss is Roy Bailey, who's a former police superintendent and criminal justice researcher, who's also a Labour Party councillor in Bracknell. Roy, great to have you with us on the programme to get your perspective with all of your various experience. I wonder, first of all, if you could give us your perspective as why you think we've seen this spate of violence across the UK.
I don't even know where to begin, to be honest. First, let me say I'm ashamed by what I'm seeing, and I certainly endorse 100% what Sir Keir Starmer has said. This obviously has to be brought under control urgently. I think what's been happening is this has been going on for months, if not years, and the populist rise have been growing in strength. Social media also has a major part to play in all of this. The toxicity of some of its posts, it's all deliberate, it's all designed to cause unrest, and this is clearly what's happening now. Most of it is based on lies, it's false, it's untrue, but sadly there are people who are prepared to listen and believe, much like what we're seeing with Trump in the States, and this is really sad, and I'm not sure what, if anything, could be done. In the short term, we have to manage it. Long term, much more complex, challenging things for us to do around education, coming together.
Well, what is your view on how the riots have been handled by police in so many different towns and centres? I mean, from Liverpool to Hull to Bristol, they've popped up in so many towns. What's your assessment of how the police have dealt with it as a former police superintendent yourself? Yeah, well, I take my hat off to them. I write semi-academic logs about policing, many of which are critical. But on this, let me say straight away that I couldn't imagine anything worse than having missiles thrown at you, having to maintain peace in really troubling circumstances. I think they're managing it really well, but there will be a toll on the police. We've seen years of austerity. Numbers were cut to the bone. The criminal justice system virtually was decimated by the previous government. So we're in a hell of a bad place. But I do applaud the police, and I think most of the public should applaud what they're doing as well. It's them or anarchy.
What's your view on how this could have been prevented, though? Is it something that there needs to be more resources in monitoring online groups? Is that how this could be identified? Is it a community engagement issue?
I think it's all of those, to be fair. Certainly social media has been absolutely toxic, and I think much more should be done. I mean, obviously the police are arresting hundreds of people and they're going to suffer the consequences for their actions. But I just hope that also includes a really forensic attack on those people that have been sponsoring it. I mean, the Reform MPs have got a lot to hang their heads in shame about. And some of the other well-known right-wing commentators who've gone very quiet since they've seen what's been going on. So it's a hell of a challenge, and I don't profess to have the answers, but I take my hat off to the police for what they're doing.
The thing is, it's a week since that Stockport incident that shocked the nation, quite frankly, that the deaths of those young girls, very young children.
Yes.
Did the government get a battle plan quickly enough? Because drip, 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 over the days, the violence has actually spread.
it was a bit like a contagion, a wildfire that just very rapidly got out of hand. I use Twitter, or X as it's now called, and I've blocked literally hundreds of people. When I see what they've written and where their sources are from, it fills me with despair. I mean, where's the evidence? Where's the objectivity? We have to take stock of all of this. I still believe, though, even more than my 30 years in the police, that most people, if there's a choice between good or evil, they will always choose good. We have to remember that. We do have to remember
But did
that.
Starmer and Yvette Cooper and the rest of the Labour team, this is their first major test a month in, certainly when it comes to domestic issues, did they absorb that quickly enough and deal with it? I mean, perhaps the accusation might be that they didn't.
No, I don't agree with that. And I've been following it very closely, as you might expect, and I don't see what else they could have done, or more quickly they could have done it. I mean, Starmer's cancelled his holiday. There's a COBRA meeting going on this morning as we speak, and they had a meeting with police chiefs. They're aware of the potential of all of this, as indeed are the people that have been inspiring it and inciting it on the right wing. I mean, it's those people that should be targeted now to be called to account and brought to justice swiftly.
How do you view this as being a situation similar to the riots in London in 2011? Is that a reasonable comparison to be making?
Well, there are comparisons. The comparisons made in the way that they were dealt with. The courts were set up quickly. The people were brought to justice swiftly and were imprisoned swiftly. So I think there's a similarity there. But I think here, though, it's this affray, assembly, riots, whatever you want to call them, have been brought about by the populist right. And let me just say also that I think Putin is behind much of this without firing a single shot, and it's very cost-effective. He's disrupted NATO, he's disrupted the EU, he's now trying to disrupt one of the major players in Europe, i.e. the UK.
Does that mean that the rioters or those engaged in any of those demonstrations, do they have any legitimate grievance in your view? You're talking about it being the right wing, about it being a populist movement. The right would argue that they and their voters want less immigration. The riot was called Enough is Enough. Did none of those people have a legitimate grievance?
But you can't conflate that. I mean, they may have a grievance in their view about immigration. I hesitate to say illegal immigration, because if they're asylum seekers, there's quite a marked difference between that. If you have a grievance, that doesn't give you entitlement to go and wreck towns, burn libraries, and do the things. And I mean, setting fire to hotels where it was alleged asylum seekers were staying, that is probably one of the most serious offences you could ever commit. Arson with intent to endanger life carries life imprisonment. And I think everyone involved with that should be charged with that offence. I mean, that's how serious it is.
But are the messages coming from the Prime Minister that, retribution will come, that people will be punished for this? Is that enough to dissuade people or to bring this to an end? Is that going to be the right message that's going to resolve what looks to be, a kind of quite a significant wave of violence?
It is a significant wave of violence, but I think in the first instance, law and order has to be maintained. That's the first and most important priority. Thereafter, we have to talk, we have to discuss, we have to understand. But please don't think, it is true that, some people would argue that the white working class have become alienated. I think there is some truth in all of that, so that needs to be addressed. But that's quite different from giving them a reason or excuse to go and wreck and assault people. I mean, Nazi salutes. What we've seen is horrifying, absolutely horrifying, and no right-minded person anywhere would support that. Is
it Islamophobia?
I think that there's no question that's involved. Absolutely no question that's involved. You've seen, as I have seen, some of the scenes on social media and television of people just being assaulted because they're Asian or they're black. I mean, just outrageous. And we are better than this. We have to be better than this. So in the first instance, say, get it under control, make sure that justice is done and seen to be done. Then starts a journey of how do we get back to, getting these people or everyone to work together, to understand that it's important to get the truth of situations, not to be frightened into action that we've seen. That's not easy. and there'll be a raft of things that can be done. But minds greater than mine need to start thinking about that urgently, so we can set a path. And I'm sure Sir Keir Starmer will want to do that.
In terms of the evidence of that you see in your day-to-day work as a Labour Party councillor, is that how you feel about it? Also, the government has stayed away from, at least up until now, has not used the term Islamophobia. In terms of how this plays through as a party councillor, how do you think that the issues should be addressed in the UK? Well,
fortunately, I'm in Bracknell, and I see very little of that, to be fair. I see very little of that. Reform had a sizable chunk of the vote here in the last election, although Labour did win here. So there is a sizable group of people that support Reform's aims and objectives. So for me, what that says is it doesn't make them bad people. It means that we have to work doubly hard to try and get to impress upon them that the national interest are their interest and that we can coincide with all of that. It's not easy, as I've discovered. If you're on the doorstep and you're starting from different places, you have to be really patient and listen to them. I mean, I don't think there's been enough listening anywhere, to be frank, but we need to listen to them. It doesn't mean that, by listening they're right and we're wrong, but it just means we have to start a dialogue that's meaningful and can make progress. And there may be some issues and areas where progress can be made. And I think also reassurance about what this actually means. But some of it, I think, comes as a direct result of what's been put out on social media by people with a deliberate agenda. I mean, I saw there was one former Tory MP that tweeted something to the effect that he's on holiday in Europe. He says, I hear it's scorching in the UK right now. I mean, what a stupid, nasty, flippant comment that was. Outrageous.
OK, Roy Bailey, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you for joining us. Labour Party councillor in Bracknell and former police superintendent. Just also on that point that Roy was discussing there about the question of whether Russia was involved in this as well. I'm just looking at some of the research that's been done by the Bureau of Investigative Journalism on this as well, that do say that it is too early to provide evidence of that. It's a claim that has been echoed by many and some in officialdom as well, that there was some Russian influence involved. But of course, that's not something that's been immediately verified and confirmed. And investigation, of course, will continue on that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And the issues now, of course, with the criminal justice system and the resources. We've reported a lot on the pressures on courts and on prisons. So now to that issue too.
Well, that's it from us for today. If you like the programme, don't forget to subscribe, give it 5 stars so other people can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify or wherever you listen.
This episode was produced by Tiwa Adebayo. Our audio engineer was Sean Guastamakia. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. We'll be back with more tomorrow. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg UK Politics. Listen weekdays at noon on DAB Digital Radio in London.